Can you talk a bit about the importance of representation when it comes to younger women in animation, film, things like that?
It's crazy how few women there are, especially in effects, visual effects, and it's really apparent, like especially when you go to the VES awards, like how when you look on stage and like who's getting these nominations and whatnot, and so it's when I do see a woman on stage, it's like I perk up a little bit. I'm like, oh, look at that, like that's really cool. And when I was a kid, and because I got my degree in computer science, and I remember there was like a career day thing where somebody came in, he was a programmer, and so something he said was like, oh yeah, only one out of 10 programmers or some stat are women. And I was like, you know what, like I'm gonna be one of those. And there's a quote that I heard a while ago, is like you can't be what you cannot see. And I think that's so important. I think like the more that we show that like this field is not just like a boys club, and just show the diversity, and it's something that anybody can do. Like it's just important to put your face out there and like do these podcasts and like hear our voices and show that we can all be successful in this industry. So
No, that's great. I think it's really important, especially not only being one of those, but also how do you change the stat? How do we get to 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10 until we get to 50%? Yeah, no, I think it's really important. So thank you again. Do you see the industry having changed more towards encouraging and supporting diversity over the last 10 years?
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's actually, I feel like it's been more obvious in the last like 4 years, maybe 3 or 4 years. Since I've been going on set and doing the production thing, I've definitely noticed like a huge push for sure.
That's great. And Maggie, what about you? Do you see the industry having changed more towards encouraging and supporting diversity over the last 10 years?
Yeah, I think because storytelling and great stories come from all walks of life and a diverse experience pool, that in order to have those really meaningful stories, they're coming from all parts of the world, right? So whether it's female, trans, and other minority groups, it's like, I want to hear that story. That's part of the human experience. So to make a better product, to make a better story, you have to have all of those perspectives kind of woven in together.
Absolutely. And Aaron?
I think I'm hearing a lot more, there's a lot more press and a lot more like more of a spotlight put on the lack of women in the field. So I think just like having that, just throwing that out there is great. And we're shedding like this on this issue, but I do think that we are trying to encourage people, and I have been seeing a lot more like junior artists come up that are female, and it's, which I think is wonderful. But what I'd love to see is more women in leadership, because I think that's where we're still lacking. Like it's still like, it's such a slow, it's like glacial movement. Like for all the talk that we've been doing, there are still like not enough women who are in those like supervisory roles, like who have those like like title, like the front of the card credits, like on films and stuff. And we need to not only encourage people to come into this industry, but we need to encourage like women who are already here to to rise up and make create an environment that like makes women like want to be in those roles. So yeah, that's we just need to keep going.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely want to see like what we can do that's more actionable towards that, because you're right, like I think awareness is really important, but it's also from each side about what actions can be kind of rolled out to like make change versus just discussing change. So we'll definitely talk about that. And Connie, just to chime in with you as well, like what are your thoughts?
I definitely think that there are more diverse stories being told now. Definitely think that's a positive thing. I do agree with Aaron that there should be more women in decision-making roles and in leadership. I see that in the management side of it, there's a lot of women. So, and more women coming up. But as far as like on the executive level and on the awards, you look at who's nominated, it's still a specific group, and it hasn't been diversified as much as it would be. It would be great to see that.
I agree. In your views around equality in the workplace, like I said, to make it more actionable, like I'm putting every one of you on the spot here with this, but what do you think as a whole, people in general, all of us need to do to take action and make permanent change for pushing towards equality in the workplace?
It's always a tough question. I mean, I think, like Aaron said, we just definitely have to keep doing what we've been doing. I think, obviously, you know, again, as we've all said as well, putting women in positions of power, but not just because you're trying to fill a quota, but, you know, because there are a lot of really great female artists and managers and supervisors out there. You just gotta kind of give them a chance. And I think also value the way women work. I think, you know, I don't want to say that we're so different. It's just, you know, it's not the same. It's not the same as, I just think the way we work is, and the way we act maybe is going to be a little bit different. I think that should be valued. I guess what I'm trying to say is like just coming up and like, again, like on the production side of things, VFX supervisor, it's very like, I don't want to say aggressive or assertive maybe. And it just kind of values this sort of, you know, just something a little bit more, you know, it kind of just pile drive over people. And that's just not the way I like to work. I like to work with people and I like to listen to other people's ideas. I love being collaborative, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think that, you know, that's the way I like to work, and that's probably the way a lot of women like to work. And I just think that that's something that needs to be valued.
Yeah, no, I think it's so important. And you're right, there's always going to be different personalities. And, you know, it kind of goes back to even just the phrase that we hear a lot of times, like, you know, a-holes finish first or get ahead, just because there are going to be people who are quite outspoken. But in general, like, there's so many people who perhaps aren't being heard or aren't as vocal or aggressive that have so much to give.
Yeah, and I think that you're exactly nailing it. It's just like, we don't all have to be like type A to like, we shouldn't have to be.
Exactly. No, thank you. Maggie, just to chime in as well, like, again, I realize this is kind of like one of those, you know, how do we make change? But I honestly think that there's a lot you guys can contribute here in terms of what kind of actionable things can we do that move beyond just, hey, you know, let's bring awareness to this, but actually, like, how do you kind of instill change permanently that isn't more of a, you know, a 3-year thing that kind of resorts back to, you know, how it was 5-10 years before that?
I think encouraging allies to be supportive of you and your wins. So when you do have those successes, who do you broadcast out to? Like LinkedIn and turn notifications on, you know, like share with your network. And then, you know, that becomes like, oh, there's a great example of someone who, you know, reached the C-suite or the executive level or the executive board, you know, team membership. Like, for example, for the Visual Effects Society, our executive team is all female for the first time in its history. And I think that's monumental. It's huge. And they were elected into those positions by the board of directors, right? So, you know, being present in that Zoom room and voting for, you know, and electing people into those positions, like, I want to not only celebrate those wins, but it's like, okay, you know, the industry is starting to change in very tangible ways that we can celebrate and lift those voices as those wins come in. So, you know, find your allies, celebrate those wins, and lift those voices as you go.
That's awesome. Thanks, Maggie. And Aaron, do you want to chime in as well?
It's a difficult question to answer. I think there's a lot of different solutions. I think just to Maggie's point about allies, and, you know, when we talk about diversifying leadership and management, like the management level, I think there's like a certain, like, part of the status quo that gets a little bit nervous when they hear that, right? Because I think they're getting pushed out. And that's not necessarily the case. It's like we need to just create more opportunities for people to, you know, get their voices heard. It's not necessarily like, let's swap this guy out for this woman or anything like that. And so I think, like, and unfortunately, this does put the onus on on us to, you know, make people feel comfortable about, you know, this change. But I think we need to make people want to, you know, let others bubble up to the surface and, you know, just understand that it's not about swapping people out or anything like that, and quelling that fear, because I think that's something that, is perhaps motivating, or at least stifling some of the change that needs to happen at higher levels. As far as our hiring practices, currently at the company I'm at, you see so many, we try to see as many reels from women as we can, and it's just important to to mix it up a bit. So yeah, anyway.
That's great. Thank you, Erin. And Connie, what about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's really about changing the culture. I do agree with some of the prior comments about sometimes the loudest or the most aggressive voice is heard and decisions are made based on that. And it is really understanding that there is another way of communication, or that other voices also should be given a platform and also be listened to. And that is really just changing the culture. I mean, changing the culture of companies, changing the culture at large, to really understand that, there are other voices, and even this quiet, small voice is also important and might have some valuable information. So it shouldn't always be the most aggressive person. And sometimes it does end up being the loudest or most aggressive person or voice that it is heard, and those decisions are made based on that.
Awesome.
So,